For joining with the Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. My name is Christian D. Evans, your host. And guys, we have someone very, very incredible on. And we're just so excited because in today's world, you hear a lot about women. And don't get me wrong, that is incredible. But also, we really want to focus on the men as well, building them up and building the women up right alongside. So obviously changing the world together. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we're very excited to be having this guy on. And I just want to share with you a little bit about his background, okay? This man is the founder of the Purpose Infused Brotherhood, which helps driven men become the best version of themselves by building, battling, and bonding together, getting men initiated into a family where they belong. He was 35 years old and living by what the world and everyone else told him, and he should be. He was the responsible man, yet he was filled with worry, anxiety, anger, stress, negativity, shame, fear, and the list went on. Then the crap hit the fan with a full-blown anxiety and panic attack over a TV show, guys. This is when he decided to bring death to the old self and out of those ashes gave birth to the new purpose-infused man. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Clay Smeltzer. Man, how you doing, bud?
I'm great, man. Thank you for having me on here, Christian. I super appreciate it and just being able to have the chat. But man, listen to that. I was like, wow, like so I wrote that. I see it. I read it myself, but that's the first time I actually heard it.
That's awesome.
Able to expand the world to where we really need to go.
That's awesome, man. That's incredible. And obviously, I mean, what I'd like to dive into a little bit, obviously, the impact that you've been able to help so far in men. Just tell me a little bit of kind of your background story, kind of where you're going and what that future looks like for you, bud.
And you shared a little bit of my story there at 35 years old on my couch. I was watching a Game of Thrones episode. My wife was sleeping. I don't know how she was sleeping through Game of Thrones. But it's an infamous scene. It's the whole door scene. And in that, I don't know if you ever watched that show or not, but that really, I felt like the person who was trapped inside of that tree. It was like a little pixie lady in there, just trapped, surrounded by all these ice zombies. And I felt like that inside. And from there, that's when I had a panic attack. I'm sweating, I'm doing all these things. My wife is sitting next to me and I'm thinking about myself going, if I can't take care of myself, how am I going to take care of my family? I'm also a school teacher as well. So in teaching, I was overwhelmed, I was overworked, I was overstressed. I was feeling like I had all of this stuff to do in education. And that's a whole nother beast on itself. And then coming home and having, the house, the work, the cars, the finances, all of that stuff, feeling like I've never got time for myself, feel like I never had enough time for my family, feeling like I was always just in that rat race. And for me, that was that tipping point of that point. That was like the crap hit the fan, was like, something has to change. And in that, I knew it took me 2 weeks to say something. I didn't tell my wife. I just let her sleep. I kind of did my thing, kind of faded out of that anxiety, panic attack mode. But I kept it silent for 2 weeks until I actually spoke out. When I started to speak out, that's when things actually changed. And I was open enough to actually change myself and actually deal with the things I didn't want to deal with, which was anxiety, fear, shame, all that kind of stuff that goes on. So from there, that's where the birth of the Purpose Infused Brotherhood kind of came, because I don't want any man to feel like I did. I mean, it was living like I was living inside of my own hell, inside my own head. And I just don't want any guy to feel like that. So if I can give some tools, tactics, tips, things like that, to allow men to be able to deal with the things that they don't really want to deal with, to be able to burn that old self down to all the things that we don't want to deal with, or the shame, or those regrets, or any of that stuff. I can help them overcome those things prior to doing that, or that work-life balance that just seems to throw us all over the place. If I can help men do that before they get to the space where I got to, man, that is absolutely what I'm here to do. So that's where the brotherhood came from, because one of the things that I did to get out of that cycle and out of that spin and out of that negative thoughts about myself is I got together with other men. I started listening to other men who went through. I try to find people who went through what I went through. I listened to people like Les Brown, Eric Thomas. I listened to a whole bunch of other people. I started to read books for the first time, and I'm like, oh wow, I actually can get better. So I started to learn about myself, and when I learned about myself, I realized that I wanted to be around other guys. So I started to just develop a group of guys that we could share. And then all of a sudden I'm like, no, wait, you're going through that too? Like, or you went through that? I'm not the only one in this picture that goes through this, in this world that goes through this. And that's where things started to change. That's where the Purpose Infused Brotherhood came from. It kind of gave birth out of that. But where we're going is we're going over by April, we're looking to be over 100 men, and then also on to a couple 100,000 in the future. I would have packed 100,000 men live Purpose Infused live that take their energy, what they're good at, who they are, why they do what they do, and impact their communities. I love the phrase "blossom where you're planted." I just want to help men do that all around the world.
That is awesome. And just unleash that potential, which is just incredible. Now, let me ask you, when you were on that couch and, excuse me, you were going through that struggle. Okay. Yeah. Did someone come alongside of you and help you and pull their hand in the dirt and the filth and pull you out? Or was that just yourself? And like you said, and those other kind of third party mentors, if you will, that they didn't know you, but you listened, you know, obviously, like you said, some of those individuals. So what did that look like?
That looked at when I was on the couch. But before that, my ego got in the way. Listen, we're guys, like our ego gets in the way all the time. My ego was totally in the way. I was the tough guy thinking I can handle this all by myself. But the problem is I couldn't. You know, I needed other people along, men, women, all the people. I need my wife alongside me. I need my kids. So I needed them to be able to come along. It wasn't that they pulled me out because I had to do the work, but they gave me ideas, thoughts, and they made me think differently. So it was the panic attack that initiated me going, something has to change. It was me finally opening up to my wife and saying, hey, I have anxiety. It's been for 2 weeks every single day. There's the weirdest stuff going on in my head. I don't know what to do about it. I just want it to stop. I'm not here. I don't want to hurt myself, but I just want it to stop and I don't know how. And she's like, I'm here for you. And I don't know what to do, help either, but I'm here for you. And I'm like, no, wait, hold on a sec. You don't think less of me as a man, as a husband, as a father? You don't like, she's like, no, why would I? And I'm like, oh man, I should have said this a long time ago. Like but what happens is I was mirroring onto her what I thought about myself. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the biggest things to say, wow, as soon as I talked and I shared and I realized that mirror, that negativity was only my own thoughts about myself, nobody else's. That's when I was actually willing enough to be aware of other people. That's where Eric Thomas, Les Brown, I love John Maxwell. You know, I love that. Jocko Willink writes a great book, Extreme Ownership. Like, I love those things. And that's where I started to dive into that because I wanted to take ownership of my life, because being trapped in that space where I didn't have ownership of my life. My thoughts, everything else around me did. I wasn't in control of my life.
Now, let me ask you this, because I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, and specifically men, they tend to be more risk takers. But with that, there's sometimes you take so many risks that after a while your spouse gets a little frustrated with you, right? You've got a failure after failure. You spent this and you spent this. And so let me ask you this, you know, when you were in that detrimental time, right? And I would imagine you probably have had previous failures before that, right?
Yep, absolutely.
With your wife, were you just fortunate having a really good wife that always supported you? Or was that having a conversation? It's like, hey, I need you to support me in this during this process and during this time. For those men that are listening, that may or may not have that situation.
Correct,
as that spouse.
I believe I'm divorced twice. So I've had situations where one of my divorces did occur because I put way too much in it. Well, part of it was I put way too much into that business aspect and I forgot about everything else. Now, I was doing it for good reasons, to build a family, to create financial, stability, things like that. But the problem is I focused way on this and I totally forgot about other people that were in my life. So that can happen. So for me, this time is where I had to be honest and had to say, hey, listen, this is a passion of mine. This is what I feel. Here's why I want to do it. Here's who I want to help. Here's where I want to go. And being able to be open and honest about those different things, my wife is able to support me. Now, there are things that go along. Hey, you're spending too much time here, but those are conversations along the way that she has to be open enough to have the conversation with you, but you also have to be open enough to have the conversation with her. And that's where some of that dialogue comes in. It's all about communication. And that dialogue that comes in between your spouse and yourself is saying, hey, here's what my dreams are. Here's what my hopes are. Here's what we want to do this for. And that way it doesn't interfere, but there can be what we call that. I talk about work-life balance. I don't like the word balance though. we got to have that transition. So from my work as a teacher here, I transitioned to home to make sure that now I'm with my wife. So I'm focused on my wife at 100%. Now, when I came down to my office and now where I'm here, I'm 100% with you and your audience. Now, when I go from here, I'm going to transition from here. I'm going to reset my mindset, my energy, my presence. And as I go upstairs to home, my kids are up there, my wife's up there. Now I'm going to transition into that. So I had to get really good at not just being here, or just solely focused on this. I had to get really good at transitioning from one area of my life to the other, because that balance, I'm a math teacher. So balance means it has to always stay even. But the problem with that is, to be even, there has to be stagnation. And I don't like that word stagnant, because I'm a doer. I've been an athlete my whole life. I'm a doer. I'm a go-getter. That's where I want to go. So that just doesn't play into my mentality.
Which is awesome. So, I mean, really what it comes down to, what you're saying is you're being intentional with your, and being very present during that time. And I
Correct.
think, I honestly, just to share with you, I struggle with that. I know that when I'm, definitely at the beginning, I remember when I was, in business, and I would be at the office and I'd feel guilty for not being at home.
Yeah.
And then when I'm at home, I feel guilty for not being at the
Absolutely.
office. And obviously I was able to overcome that. But what I found so interesting is that, a lot of men and a lot of women as well struggle with that. But I'm just intrigued to see, at what point did you realize that not only did the transition, but you had to be intentional with that transition? And you have to, it sounds like to me, you literally sometimes have to breathe and say, okay, Clay, I'm with my wife. Clay, I'm at business, right? So I'm just curious, what does that look like for you? And how long did that take you to establish that?
Well, I want to actually go back on the guilt thing, because one of the strategies that I utilize in the top 7 strategies to get out of the work-life balance is get rid of the guilt. Because lots of times, especially, you're a go-getter. I'm a go-getter. I know many of your people listening and your audience are go-getters. They're like, hey, let's work. I'm cool with grinding it out. I'm cool with working hard. I was the first guy on the field, last guy off. That's why I was able to play at a high level. But what happens is we, like you said, I felt guilty when I was at work that I wasn't at home, but I felt guilty at home when I wasn't at work. But lots of times what we think about as men, especially because we're provider protectors, is that guilt, like other people are suffering because we are focused on this other area. Just like a lot of times, especially women and men, when we want to go to the gym, well, my kids are at home. I don't want to take time because I feel guilty that I'm going to go to the gym and work on myself, and my kids are at home for like an hour. Well, I always heard from guys that I was in business with before, I always heard them say, you have to be selfish in order to be selfless. And I'm like, when I was younger, I was in my late 20s. I'm like, I don't even get what you're saying. I'm like, that's cool. Great. Awesome. High five. Let's go to the next thing. And until I actually started practicing it in that transitional phase, is looking at, man, I had to put myself first in order to be better for everybody around me. And when I take care of me first, and when you take care of you first, and you get this right, and I've worked on the 5 foundations: body, mind, bonds, bills, and spirit. When I get those areas right, I'm centered, I can pivot, I can move, I can do what I need to do, which allows me to be able to transition from one aspect of my life to the other in a faster amount of time. I was really bad at it at first, but it takes practice. I mean, I have a 40-minute drive from my school to home, and I was still bad. I had 40 minutes to collect myself. And I got home and I'm like, I'm still raging over something that happened at school or set me off or whatever, or like just trying to calm down. But I had to practice transitioning my energy, transitioning my thoughts, transitioning my presence to what the next aspect needed of me. And I had to realize, what is that? You said a key word: intention. One of the biggest things, and another strategy that I teach is having a routine to set intention, or having a routine for your mind. So I always teach people, have a morning routine, have an evening routine. But the morning routine, here's what it does. It allows you to set intention for your day, whether it's meditation, journaling, prayer, whatever you do, whatever you connect with. But it allows you to set intention for the rest of your day. So I can go through my day and say, hey, here's what I'm going. Here's how I live. Here's what I do. Here's what's going to happen. A lot of say, hey, do the big 3. Here's my big 3 I got to accomplish. At the end of the day, I say, do an evening routine as well. And what that does is it allows you to assess, reflect, and adjust. Because at the end of the day, we all want to know, hey, did I leave it all on the field? And that's what probably one of the biggest things my dad taught me as a coach as well. He was my high school football and baseball. He stood us along the line and he said, boys, he looked at us and my dad had big handlebars and he just looked mad all the time. He wasn't, but he just looked mad all the time. He'd look at you with the brows and he's like, boys, if you're going to walk across that line, you better be willing to leave it all on the field or don't walk across my line. And I'm like, okay. So
I love that.
Once I went through my stuff, I'm like, you know what? I used to wake up and roll out of bed annoyed just because it's early. I don't like getting up early. I was doing this. I was thinking about all the bad stuff that was going through my day. And now I changed my tune. Once I went through my stuff and I started digging into myself, I set intention when my foot hits the ground, that's my line. So every single morning, before I roll out of bed, I wake up and I'm like, I woke up. Today's a good day. Let's go get it. And when my foot hits the ground, that's me walking across the line. And my intention is to leave it on the field. So when I do my evening routine, I look back, assess, reflect, and adjust. Did I leave it all on the field? And I can lay my head down at night and go, yes. And because honestly, if I don't, I might have regrets and I don't want that, but I might not wake up tomorrow. And if I didn't, I'm going to make sure that my last day here on earth, I left it all on the field. And that's something I think is very important.
That's incredible. And let me ask you this as well, because obviously I love what you just said, self-reflect and adjust. Yes. Everybody has, in their mindset, what success looks like. And one of the things I've learned is you got to identify what winning is, right? Yep. Because if you don't identify what winning is for you, then, you're never going to achieve that, right? And you got to measure that, of course. So let me ask you this, for you on a day-to-day basis, to be able to say, okay, you know what? I left it all on the court, right? Left it all on the field. Okay. What does winning look like for you on a day-to-day basis? It says, hey, you know what? Some days crap hits the fan. Some days it doesn't, right? But at the end of the day, all you can do is all you can do. So I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit and what that winning on a day-to-day basis looks like for you.
Absolutely. For me, it's all about purpose. It's a Purpose Infused Brotherhood. And the purpose infused is because when I leave it on the field, to mean I lived with my purpose today. And if I don't, that's my choice. If I do, that's also my choice. So in that meaning, one of the other, I do some one-on-one work as well. And I really focus on what is your purpose in the Purpose Revealer program. And what that does is it zones it down to exactly who you are. So for me, my purpose is to own myself, is to love my story, and is to live with purpose every single day and help other people do that. That's also the whole design of the brotherhood, because that's what we do. We build, battle, and bond together, but we build foundations of strength in ourselves and others. We battle through life struggles to be the best version of ourselves every single day. And we bond together as a family and lift each other up through ownership and accountability. What's that help people do? It helps them own themselves, love their story, and live with purpose. If I do those three things and I operate solely on those three things, then I've lived with purpose. Just like here, like coming on here, does it help me own myself, love my story, live with purpose, and help other people do that too? Yes, that's why I'm here. If it doesn't hit one of those three things, I don't do it. So my intention for the day is very clear. My intention for every moment is very clear. On here, I do that. I'll go up, we'll eat dinner together. That's one of the things that our family is all about. We eat dinner together. That's where we talk. No phones, put them away. We eat dinner together. That's our boundary. We set it and we keep it. And for that, like, I'm going to go up and have conversations that help not only me, but my wife, my kids own themselves, love their story, and live with purpose. And if I've done that throughout my day and all my interactions, I've left it on the field. If I haven't done that, I didn't leave it on the field. So that's my gauge on whether or not at the end of the day, I can lay my head down and be like, yeah, I gave it. And you're right. Stuff comes up. So what strategies do you have in place in order to be able to take care of some of those things? What boundaries do you have set? How do you view, what's your viewpoint on, looking at how present am I? Because your kids, really, it's not about quantity of time, it's about quality of time. Are you present? Are you present with your spouse? What do they need at that moment in time with what they need? They just need you to listen. We're fixers. That's the biggest thing I learned in relationships, is stop trying to fix everything. Just listen.
Well, let me ask you, because that kind of segues into kind of what we're talking about, as well as like relationships, because see, what I always find interesting is, let me ask you this, Clay. So the average individual that comes to you, okay, they obviously do very well. They're very successful individuals,
Yes.
but what do they struggle with the most? Is it the relationship with their business and spending too much time with the business, or is it the lack of relationships with their family, their spouse? That what is their area that you find that they tend to need work on the most? And like you said, creating those boundaries, creating that intention, creating that discipline, creating that purpose. I'd love to dive into that a little bit and what you found so far dealing with hundreds upon hundreds of men.
Yeah, absolutely. The driven man is always good with work. We'll go work. We'll go work our butts off. We're always good with that. But the problem that comes in is we dive so much into that and we put so much into that. We feel like there's two areas. We feel like we're missing out with our families and our spouses, and we feel like we're missing out with ourselves. And what I found out is over the last 2 years of building the brotherhood is we found out that the biggest one that is the most detrimental to how you feel and the way your life is going to where you want it to be, from the expectation of where your life is to where the reality is, the biggest detriment is the one that we don't have enough time. We don't put in enough time for ourselves. And the reason why, just like I said, I was giving myself to everybody else, to my wife, to my kids, to my students, to my boss, to the community, to here. I was giving everything to everybody else and I was giving nothing to myself. And I wasn't taking the time for me. And that's one of the biggest things. Again, it's like the oxygen mask on I'm sure you've heard that in your listeners, but if you don't put the oxygen mask on yourself, like you're not helping anybody else out because you're not there, and one of the things that I always talk about too is think about you as a cup. What we do is in our cup, we put things in our cup and then we allow people to drink out of our cup. Well, I was allowing everybody to drink out of my cup and my cup kept depleting. What I found out is getting to listen to guys, like Eric Thomas, Les Brown, all those guys, Tony Robbins, all these guys, John Maxwell, Jocko, listening to all these guys, what I found out is that I could actually overflow my cup. And if I overflow my cup, people don't get to put stuff in my cup and people don't get to take out of my cup. That's only me. And what I get to do is that overflow, they get to drink from my overflow. And all I have to do is make sure that every single day I'm overflowing my cup. You can drink as much as out of my overflow as you want. It'll still overflow. I just got to focus on that. And I think that's one of the things that we're so willing to give, to say, hey, when I give, I find happiness, which is somewhat true. But when we don't give to ourselves, we hurt ourselves the most.
Wow. And I've seen so many people that have that. It's almost an unconscious thing where it's a self-sabotage, if you will. You don't even realize. And then obviously you're doing it over and over. And that's where, someone like yourself, Clay, that can come in and say, hey, you need to redirect this a little bit. So let me ask you this as well. So, because I know my audience very well. And I know some guys are like, oh, this is just mushy gushy, whatever, next one. But there's also some that say, hey, you know what? They'll humble themselves. So let me ask you this. The individuals that come to you, okay, what kind of characteristics do they have that get the most out of it? Where you're like, okay, you know what, they're humble, they're ambitious. What characteristics do they have that says, hey, you know what, I want to embrace the uncomfort, because this, this is uncomfortable for men specifically, to be able to embrace it and to grow to what you've been able to do with many, many men.
To me, they're honest, they're straightforward, they're driven, and they have a willingness to be vulnerable. I say willingness to be vulnerable. And that's the biggest thing. I laughed when you said about the guys that think this is frou-frou, because that was me. I literally was like meditation. Hey, let's go hug a tree and be like, woo, yay, like all that kind of stuff. That was me. But the problem is once I did it, I'm like, wow, like, okay, like I've kind of stuck my foot in my mouth there, talking about your feelings. Like, who does that? Like that's not a tough guy. That makes me less than a man. But I realized that when I didn't deal with my feelings, I flipped out over a TV show. Like that's not being strong. Me trying to never show my kids vulnerability, to never show my kids weakness, to never show my wife weakness, to never show myself weakness or the world isn't strength. It's actually insecurity, which is weakness. But for me to go dive into my shadow about fear, about pain, about past hurts, about anxiety that was running my life, about shame that I felt about not being worthy as a man, husband, and father, or not being able to ask the greatest questions of a man. Am I good enough? And do I have what it takes? And those were no and no. Like, I don't want to talk about, I don't want to show anybody that I was deemed as Mr. Positivity, but inside I was Mr. Negativity. I was Mr. Drowning in my own feeling, in my own emotions I couldn't handle. And so I was fake. I showed everybody else the person I wanted them to see, but I didn't show them the real me. And that's where I now understand that a sign of strength is to deal with the stuff I don't want to deal with, to go to the emotions that I don't like, to handle those, to look at those and say, hey, they're a part of me. I own all of it. Whereas before I tried to kick all these emotions out. I tried to kick fear, tried to kick all these things out, but they're a part of me. It happens. And I own and embrace that now. I don't shove them away. I don't try to, because the harder I tried to kick them out, the more they fall back. So I own them, but I utilize them in a way that allows me to be successful, to be a high achiever, to be able to help other men do the exact same thing. Because a lot of guys that are in that space that are like, oh, that's frou-frou stuff. Okay, go to the mirror, look at yourself dead in the eyes and go, I love you, and mean it and believe it. I guarantee you won't be able to. Why? I couldn't. Because I'm the only person in the world that knows that true answer. I can now, but then I wasn't going to say it to myself. Why? Because I couldn't handle it. So it was me putting on a facade of the tough guy instead of actually dealing with the things that I needed to deal with. And it eventually blew up.
So with some of your clients, do some of them are just so beat down that they come in and they embrace that very quickly, or do some of your clients, they still have this facade and you have to kind of break it open, if you will, and pull back everything to be able to really, dial it in and asking those tough questions. Because each person's a different part of their life. But also some people, they do know that, hey, something has to change. And it's not financial. It's not this, it's internal. Right. And so I'd love to get your response on kind of what that looks like and different personalities, if you will.
Most of the guys don't come in as broken guys. They come in as high achieving guys, but they also know it's exactly what you just said. They also know that something internal isn't, I'm not center. Something's off. Like, I know here's where I'm at. I'm achieving. I'm a high achiever. I can do, I'm good, ready to go. Like one of our guys is one of the highest technicians in the world in his space. Like, but he's like, listen, man, I got to grow every single day. I know, like, here's where I'm achieving in my job, but here's things that are going else in my life. And I feel like I'm just running hard. But I want to be center. I want to feel peace. I want to feel more happiness. I want to feel more energy. I want to feel like I'm not so stressed out about this here and everything going on. And how can I do that? And being able to have the conversations that we have and being able to go through some of the things that we do in our brotherhood has been able to, like, the transition from him a year ago till now is incredible. I mean, he was running it was like a $2 billion job. Like, I'm like, I don't know how you're not stressed out to me. He's like, man, it's good. Like, yes. Is it stressful? Yes. Is my home life at this point stressful? Yes. But here's what's going to happen. I'm going to use, and we read a book called The 4 Agreements, and I forget the author. But he's like, I use the 4 agreements. And I'm like, awesome. But he learned that here. He was able to take that, apply it. But he's also taught both of his kids. He's also taught his wife that. The people that he surrounds. It's incredible. When you get with a group of men, the information that you learn and you see, and then what it does is, like, we help each other hold ourselves accountable. And that's one of the biggest things too, because I'm not here to tell anybody who they are. I'm not here to tell anybody, like, this is the way you have to do it. You have to, no. Man, you are your own you are your own being. You go kick butt how you do, but let's have a conversation. Let's have some different viewpoints. Let's get some different perspectives, because those different things occurring gives you an opportunity to assess, reflect, and adjust on whether what you're doing is working for you, whether it's not, what can be better, and then make those adjustments that you need for your own life and the success that you want out of life. Not what I want, but what you want.
Yeah, definitely. And so what I'm intrigued with what you just said is like, self-reflect, right?
Yeah.
Self-analyzing. And the biggest thing is the more you understand yourself, right? Not someone else. You don't do someone
Correct.
else's morning routine. You do your morning routine. What
Correct.
what works for you? What rejuvenates you, right? And so, when you're in that space, right? I don't know when you do it. Some people do it on Sundays and whatever, but when you're in that space, Clay, of self-reflecting and
Yep.
getting the best, what questions do you ask yourself to optimize that? And ask the tough questions to be able to
Yeah.
say, hey, I've got to really reflect on this.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you?
I always use again assess, reflect. I call it the ARA sequence. Assess. Did it work? Did it not work? Like so, like today, I'll go at the end. I do it every day, every morning, every night. So before I go to bed, I have my evening routine, brush my teeth, stuff like that, and I just kind of sit down. My meditation is more of a visualization. It's some of the practices I used in sports as well. So I do more of a visualization. So I'll visualize my day and kind of do a synopsis of my day. What worked? Did it work? Did it not work? Did I leave it all in the field? Did I not leave it all in the field? Did I achieve the things I wanted to achieve today or not? Then the reflection is why did it work? Why did it not work? And then the assess or the adjustment is then in the end, I can look at for tomorrow. It's like, all right, well, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to, I wasn't really present with my kids tonight. I came home, I was busy with this. I had some more work stuff because, I teach and then I also run the Brotherhood. So like, man, I had some other things I had to get done. Tomorrow, I'm setting a boundary of saying, you know what? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not doing any work tomorrow. I'm just staying with my kids tonight, and putting that off. So I can make those adjustments, but that I've been able to do that over the past 2 years for myself, where I can do that very quickly. But it's a process that you have to go through. But I also use the AR sequence in everything. So I use it throughout my day. The
Mm-hmm.
big time is just at the end of the day where I look at my full day. But like
Mm-hmm.
today at work with lessons I was doing today with some of the kids and stuff like that, I just after class is done, assess, reflect, adjust. Okay, here I'll write a little note, something like that. Like, hey, I got to adjust here.
Yeah.
I got to adjust there. But for me, it's an ongoing process, the ARA sequence. But also, I take that big time at the end of the day, and I take that big time at the morning just to set intention, and then to assess, reflect, and adjust at the end of the day. So tomorrow, when I wake up, I get another day to go after it, and I can make that count.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I feel like so stupid because I do it on Sundays, but I never thought doing it on day-to-day
Yep.
basis. And the reason why is because, Sundays work, I'm free, whatever, but on a day-to-day basis, it really allows you to
Yep.
stop and think about intentionally because sometimes by the time you get to Sunday, you forgot what you did on Monday and
You forgot.
Tuesday,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
and so the thing is I'm realizing, well, shoot, that's something I need to implement
Yeah.
specifically that, hey, you know what, on a day-to-day, and then like you just said, don't just say, okay, cool, wonderful, implement, have a game
Yep.
plan, a plan of action for tomorrow and say, okay, how am I going to fix this, right? Because then it's that 1 to 2, 3%, fix.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a brilliant idea. I
Yeah.
loved it. Just the intentionality
Exactly.
of it.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you,
Mm-hmm.
do you journal or do you record or do you videotape yourself just kind of as a document or do you just have like an Excel spreadsheet that says, hey, this is what, my analysis of
Yeah.
today was, or do you keep it relatively simple and just do it mentally?
I call it chaotic organized. That's what I call myself. So I kind of have it all over the place. It's definitely not in a spreadsheet. I have a whole bunch of other stuff in spreadsheets. A
Yeah.
lot of the market research and stuff that I do to help people out, I really narrow that down. But for my own self, there's two different styles that I kind of really like to do. One is like I'm an outline person, so I have like a very logical brain that kind of centers things down. So I'll outline stuff, not like the ABC order, but I'll put bullets down. So I'll outline things that kind of occur in my journal. I always this journal goes with me everywhere, and I have a ton back there. So I always keep that with me. So thoughts, things like that. If I'm out and I don't have a chance to write, I will journal in my phone. So I have that notes section in my phone. I'll type in stuff there real quick, things like that. So I'll do the outline journal of like, hey, here's what I need to do here. Here's what I need to do here. And then what I'll also do is I love to free write. So I'll just get on there and I'll get in my journal, and anything that comes in my brain, it just goes on the paper. And what it allows me to do is it allows me to expel everything. So I kind of have a fresh start. I'm like an ADD, ADHD guy, and like I can squirrel out on a whole bunch of other stuff. But what that allows me to do is decompress and put everything out. And then what I can do is I can come back to assess, reflect, and adjust and look at what's in there that is usable right now, currently for me, what isn't usable currently for me, and then what can I utilize in there to make those adjustments to where I want to go. in life in all areas, body, mind, bonds, bills, family, and spirit.
Definitely, man. I love that. I love that because see, one of the things I've discovered about myself is like the more complicated it becomes, that task, the less likely you're going to do it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes that's just procrastination, whatever. But and that's again coming down to understanding your own personality. Because if you understand your personality, hey, if you journal, fantastic. I do video, and that's just how I do it. And that's why I was just curious how you did as well. And that made total sense. Just making it accessible, made it easy. Note, phone, boom, that's it. And then you move on with your day. You don't have to really think about it too much. It just becomes so second nature, which is awesome. So now let's kind of dive into kind of a personal question, if you don't mind me asking, because I think
away. I'm an open book.
Good deal. So obviously, I know a lot of men, and definitely in the business world, they do have previous divorces, right? And let me ask you this, because see, when you go through divorce, some men they walk away, and I've seen people that have net worth of $1 million, they had $1 million home, everything like that. Then all of a sudden they hit that divorce, and they're still like, then all of a sudden they go to food stamps almost. Like it's just total drastic situation. And what I find when I'm talking to them is they be, like you said earlier, they become shameful. They become failure, right? And it's not this second thing like, oh, that was a failure. It was, I am a failure, right?
Correct.
And so let me ask you, how do you, obviously someone that's broken and so forth, right? In that situation, they're high achievers. They have that capability. How do you help them get out of that rut? Or even maybe even just business. Maybe they're, stuck at $20,000, $30,000 a month, and they're just self-sabotaging. They're just not able to bust through that for whatever reason. Because that's kind of the same, very similar situation. So how do you help them kind of really, push through, if you will?
Correct. To me, it's all about ownership. Loving your story and then living with purpose. And that's what you got to kind of do. And for me, when I say that, when I look at the situation I was in, I didn't want to take ownership of the fact that me putting myself into business so much was a portion of why my marriage ended. I didn't want to take ownership of that because that meant I did something wrong. I already thought I was bad. So like my first divorce, I was kind of blindsided. I didn't know what was happening. So on a Wednesday night, I got told 14 words, and I'm like, awesome. Like, it's great. Like, where did this come from? Like, and so that's in that process afterwards, there also wasn't a fight from the other side to keep the relationship. So what that made me feel like, and I could have said all this other stuff, but this is the honest truth. I didn't say what I'm going to say now, then. I made a lot of excuses. I blamed. I did this. I said it was everybody else's fault. Besides, I didn't take ownership. But what I realized is that the way I felt was I felt worthless as a man, as a husband, as a father. If somebody wasn't willing to fight enough for me, what did that mean that I was? Like, and that's where it's like, and a lot of guys feel that way. We won't say it, but you feel that way. And there's probably guys that are listening here that, like, if you look back at your first, like your divorce, we're high achievers, but that person wasn't willing to fight for what we had, because you as a man, when we give our heart, we give all of it. And then for somebody to come along and not fight like you're willing to fight, because for me, I was out driving. I mean, I live in Pennsylvania. So from York, Pennsylvania to Pittsburgh is 3.5 hours. I would work at school. I would teach at school. I would get off school. I would drive out to Pittsburgh on a Tuesday, Wednesday evening. I was doing this twice a week to do business out in Pittsburgh, drive all the way back, get home late, go to sleep, wake up, do it. But I was doing it, and I put all that time, effort, and hard work to provide our family in the future what I believed was necessary for financial freedom, so that we could do the things that we wanted. We had control of our time, we had control of our finances, we had control of our lives. That's what I was doing it for. So I was sacrificing a lot. The problem is that's all I sacrificed, and I didn't realize what was going. So I felt that worthlessness because somebody didn't want to fight for. So me, I'm willing to fight that much for you, but you're not willing to fight for me. So what's wrong with me? And that's where the shame came in. My second marriage was actually because at some point in time at the beginning of that marriage, she validated me as a man, husband, and father. But the problem is nobody else can validate you, especially a woman. So a man, and a man cannot do this for a woman, and a woman cannot do this for a man. Nobody can validate you but you. That's what I learned from that marriage. But I was looking for somebody else to tell me who I was, to answer the questions. Are you good enough as a man? And do you have what it takes as a man? Are you good enough as a husband? And do you have what it takes as a husband? Are you good enough as a father? And do you have what it takes as a father? I was looking for somebody else to answer those questions for me instead of myself. Wow. And so for me, once that ended, then I was like, nobody validates me but me. And like my wife now, like the coolest thing about this relationship that's way different, which is why I have the support, is that there's no other reason. Like she doesn't need me and I don't need her. We just love being together. And that's the coolest thing that I have learned throughout 2 failed marriages. Well, not failed, because I can't say failed, because I learned that's what made me me. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't a failure. It sucked. But those hardest times in my life were the best moments of growth for me. It stretched me the most. It put me in the uncomfortable. Sometimes it put me in the anxiety zone, which I'm like, I just wanted to take a nap. But I allowed myself to be able to grow, change, learn, to be able to build myself, to be able to battle through all this stuff, and to be able to bond with other people that went through the same stuff. And that's one of the reasons too, why some of that stuff I went through alone. I wish I had guys. I wish I had a brotherhood that I could have went to for help. Maybe I would have got to that point where I was sitting on the couch if I had a group of men, but I also had to be willing to be a part of that. And I wasn't at that time too. So.
No, that's just incredible. I really appreciate you being open and being vulnerable like that, because I just do know that is a massive struggle for men, and I've seen so many people and so many lives, and for women as well, right? But so let me ask you, because coming back to, I really love what you said. That second marriage, you said you found what was the word? Value or validity in yourself. You found it, and they can't validate you. You have to validate yourself.
Correct.
And so, what was that journey like? And how long did it take you to, was it literally divorce? Boom, I'm back, or was it like, what did that look like? If you don't mind me just kind of micro analyzing.
The journey was long. It was long. It was literally, and when I went through my stuff and I actually dove into the dark things I didn't want to deal with, one of the things I had to own was that, because all of this validation actually came back to my whole entire life. It went back to birth. When I look at it, just like sports, I had to own the fact that I took myself out of the major leagues, and I didn't want to do that. And so I was Clay Smeltzer chasing the major leagues in high school. That was what I thought my purpose was. But it wasn't. But the problem with that is I broke my freshman year of college. I broke my thumb in 2 places. I ended up catching the whole entire season with it. So 62 games with I ended up breaking it 3 places. I took off that summer, came back, and the doctor's like, dude, you're done. Like, you can't catch any, like, you're done. And I'm like, nah, I'm good. So I kept going. But the problem is my vision, and this is where businessmen can get, especially high achievers, high entrepreneurs, 6-7 figure entrepreneurs. This is where they can get. And I learned this from a guy named Matt Gagnon. I was talking with him, we were chatting. He's like, Clay, you were looking through a straw, man. I'm like, what's he talking about? He's like, you were looking through a straw and had no peripheral vision. The only thing that you saw were the major leagues, and you were willing to do anything it took to get to that, which includes sacrificing yourself, which is what you did. And I'm like, son of a, I'm like, you're right, man. And I'm like, because he goes, you could have stopped and then came back. And I'm like, oh yeah, I could have, but I didn't. I chose to do that. So he's like, now you got to own it. Like, and that's true. I had to own the fact that I was the one who took me out of that. But when I look at my sports, my dad was a high school baseball and football coach. The only person I cared who gave me the head nod, that dad head nod when you do something good, you're like, yeah, like, or that wink or that little thing. Yeah. That's the only person I cared. And he wasn't the head coach, but that's the only person I cared if I got that head nod or like, good job. But what was I doing? I was looking for validation that my dad said I was good enough in the game and I had what it took in the game. But I didn't need his validation. I needed my validation. So it also stems all the way back to there. So it's been a long, long road. And what I found out is after that second divorce is, listen, nobody, and the work after that too. And the work, especially with the work, when I tapped into my shadow of all the stuff I didn't want to deal with, when I tapped into my shadow and I dealt with those feelings of all the fear, the shame, the pain, the all of that, all like having to own that I took myself out of my dream. is having to deal with all of that, I realized that nobody can validate me, but they can confirm what I do. So just take what you do, the validation that what you do, and think of yourself as an apple tree in the orchard. The apple tree is what? It's an apple. You can't come up to the apple tree and be like, hey, apple tree, give me a banana. Like, it ain't gonna work. They're like, I don't do that. Like, that's not what I do. So first you got to own exactly, hey, what is it that you do? Who do you serve? How do you serve that? What results do you get them? I know exactly who I do. So what I do is that when people come and then I provide value to them, it's not a validation of saying, hey, you're going to validate who I am. No. It's a confirmation of the validation I already know about myself. I've already validated myself, but them saying, hey, Christian, man, dude, you got some good apples, man. Those are really good. Hey, I'm going to go tell other people that you got good apples. That doesn't validate who you are. You already did that. You already validated like, hey, I bring value to the world. What it did is it confirmed the validation you already knew about yourself, which now gives us that boost of energy, which now gives us that thing, you know what? I can do this. I got it, which now then casts away those seeds of doubt that business owners and entrepreneurs have. Like, man, what am I really doing? Do I have this? Do I have what it takes? Am I good enough? Yes, you are, because you've already validated inside of yourself. So going through that whole transition and really diving into my shadow and being vulnerable and being open. That's why, like, you can ask me any question, I'll just answer it. Why? Because I dealt with it all. And again, where you asked me the question too is the tough guy who's like, that's frou-frou stuff. That wasn't a tough guy that I was being. That was a weak guy because I didn't want to deal with it.
Wow.
That's the difference now that I know, is that actually being tough is dealing with the feelings. Like, I would try to hide that I cry at movies, like, for 35 years of my life. I'm a hopeless romantic. I watch those sappy shows and I cry at movies. I'm cool with that. But I didn't own that for a lot of years. Just because it's not macho to cry. Like, forget that stuff. It's good. You got to get it out.
That's awesome. I love what you just said. And definitely with you, really just hitting hard with those people that say, oh, it's frou-frou stuff. Well, that's actually weak. That's actually showing your weakness. Absolutely. And really just hitting that truth to our audience. And obviously it's hitting me as well, realizing, you know what, men in today's world, it's totally defines something different, right? And it's okay to be that. And in fact, it's actually even shows your strength and your ability and your focus and your energy to be able to do that. And then as well as that, you're doing some incredible bombs, just incredible knowledge bombs with that.
Thank you.
Definitely with the validity, because you're finding that validity and obviously having that confirmation. I love what you're saying there. Now, let me ask you this, because I've read Extreme Ownership, and I am in the mindset. So see, just to share with you, I actually was struggled with pornography for a period of time. And in order to get out of myself, out of that situation, I had to be what you call extreme, right? And what I mean by that is such an extreme that, hey, we can't even, my wife and I, we can't even watch any rated R movie that has any sexual anything, because why? Well, first of all, it's not really good for me. And secondly, it's a trigger, right? And so that allows me to build that boundary in my life, but also that's helped me with business as well, building those disciplines and boundaries. So my point is Clay, when you read and listen, and obviously taking extreme ownership, just like you said, being able to ask those tough questions of yourself, what are the things do you do to be able to really take your life to the next level and taking that total extreme ownership? Because let's be honest, it's so easy to, well, I'm not where I'm at because of my race, my religion, my life, my mom, my dad, my Billy Bob, whoever, or, well, shoot, it's because I'm not performing and I haven't dealt with those demons, right? So what does that look like for you in your life on a consistent basis to say, hey, this every single day, not only do I live with intentionality, but also with extreme ownership and taking my life to the next level. I'd love to hear that and how you've been able to help other men as well.
Oh, absolutely. I love to tell you, because this is the fun part is, one, you just said it. You got to take extreme ownership, and you got to get rid of those excuses. It's not because of anything else. Listen, you can achieve the things, but you got to get out of your own way. One of those things is being able to own yourself. Again, own yourself, love your story, live with purpose. But what I do, I call this the Phoenix cycle. And our logo is the Phoenix, and I love the Phoenix. I always have, because what the Phoenix will do is it'll burn itself down, and from the ashes of its old self, it'll give birth to a new, better self. And that's what I do. That's what I teach. So I get to a point, And every man has, you've done Phoenix cycles throughout your whole life. You're going to continue to do them. Every listener on here has done Phoenix cycles. You've burnt yourself down. You've built a new person. You've burnt yourself down. You've built a new person. We have to become aware first of what are those limiting beliefs that I have. What are those limiting things that are in my mind, my subconscious or conscious, that are holding me back from getting to where I want to go? So I want to be here. What's holding me back? But we got to be real with it. We can't just like willy-nilly like, well, this or that. That's where you got to be you got to take extreme ownership to say, listen, I am procrastinating. I'm not doing this. This is what's going on. Then what I do is I have actually an 8-step process that we go through. That it's a 3-phase cycle. And the first 2 phases are burning down the old self. So the first 2 phases are really looking at what is it that I don't like about myself that's going on? What are those limiting beliefs? What are those things that we're doing? And we're going to actually literally burn it. So there's tactics in there and tools that we do that we literally burn away all of this stuff. It's like a super, like, again, here's the frou-frou stuff. I've done is I've burnt the things I don't like about myself. And it literally is like, wow. Like, it's like a cloud that lifts over off of you. And you're like, I never thought, the first time I did, I was like, okay, I'm saying to do this, but I think it's kind of weird. And then I did, I'm like, wow, this is like so cool. Like, it's cool to burn some stuff. Just like it's cool to smash some stuff every once in a while.
Yeah.
But so that phase is really to break that down. The second phase is a step 3 to 6, step 3 to 6. No, not 3 to 6. Yeah, 3 to 6. So step 3 to 6 is really looking at who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? What's my intention? What's my vision? And it's really about setting that vision of the man that you want to be in the areas of your life that you want to be in. I deal with, body, mind, bonds, bills, and spirit. Like, who do you want to be in that? How do you want to show up? And where does that want to go? So you're setting that vision. You're setting that, you're writing it down. You're making sure all of those things are in place. And then step 6 or 7 and 8, those steps are really to solidify, here's how I'm showing up in the world. Here's the routines, here's the strategies, here's the things I'm utilizing on a daily basis to be able to be that man that I want to. And then again, every single day, we're looking at ourselves, assess, reflect, and adjust. At the end of the day, are you doing what you said you were going to do? Take extreme ownership of it. If you're not, then say you aren't and adjust and make those adjustments. And that's where part of this too is with extreme ownership is men have this expectation level that is way up here, but our reality is actually down here. And we have to actually live in our reality, especially high achievers are like, you know what? I'm going into business. I'm making $8 million this year. Well, you just started at 0. Like, you can do it, but the expectation versus the reality of how much you're going to do, when it's going to be accomplished, how it's going to be accomplished in all those time frames. If we don't hit those things and we're not realistic with the expectation versus reality, I call it the crystal ball syndrome, the expectation versus reality, then what we do is we start running shame cycles. We start thinking negative about ourselves, and we get into these other things that are just a bunch of stuff that gets us distracted away from where we actually really want to go. So for me, it's that 8-week, it's an 8-week process I utilize. That's part of our initiation program into the brotherhood, is going through that, but it's an actual 8-step process that once you go through it the first time, we take a little bit of time with the 8 weeks. But once you go through it, it's a process you can use in 8 strategies you can use over and over and over again to burn that old self down, formulate, hey, who do you want to be with that new self? And then implement those different things in your daily life to be able to do that.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I mean, just so strategic and just step by step, going across, the whole process. Now, let me ask you this, because see, obviously some individuals, I know my audience pretty well. Some of these people are like, well, I could do this by myself. I don't need clay. What would you say to those people that say, hey, yeah, I'm out here, gung ho,
Yep.
Life hits you hard. You need that support. And that, and I know the answer to it, but like, I'm just curious, what do you say to those individuals? Like, I can do this by myself. I got it. Ask myself, self-analyze and all that stuff. Like, what do you say to those?
I'd say that's one of our myths, myth number. Let me make sure I got it right here. Myth number, I think 7 is you can do it all by yourself. Here's the truth. You can't do it. Yeah. Listen, I tried for 35 years of my life to do it by myself, and guys, you need other people. Not that they need because here's the problem is we want to do it all by ourselves. But the problem with that is we're thinking like we have to take on everything. You don't have to take on everything. You have to go through it yourself. I can't come in and help any brother who, whatever issues they got going on, anything, whether it's marriage, whether it's family, whether it's work, whether it's, stress, whatever it is, I can't solve it for you. But what we can do is I can give you my perspective. I can give you a whole bunch of other guys' perspectives, what they did. And maybe that works for you. For me, it's something different. And that's where having other men around, having other people around, getting around that brotherhood of people. That's why build, battle, bond is so important, because we're building ourselves. I'm not telling you who you are, but you're going to get a whole bunch of other different ways that another guy went through it. And that's the thing too, is like, do it all by yourself. Like, I'm not going to do it for you, but I'm going to hold you also in the brotherhood. I'm going to hold you accountable to doing what you said you were going to do. So if you show up, so we meet every week for about an hour and 15 minutes on Zoom. And so if you said last week, this is what you're going to do, and then this week you didn't do it, I'm like, dude, why didn't you do it? I don't care. Honestly, in the end, it doesn't really matter if you did it or not. It's not my life. But did you do it for you? And can you go look in the mirror and be like, okay, I stayed accountable to myself. I took ownership of myself. No, that's on you. That's not on me. But I'm going to ask you those questions for sure. And that they're going to ask me. It's already happened to me. Like, I lead the brotherhood, but it's already happened to me. Guys are like, hey, I'm like, okay, you got me. All right, let's get on it. Assess, reflect, and adjust, and then go get it. Yeah.
That's incredible, man. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because again, you and I know that, you need that circle of influence, right? And it's so powerful, because also what happens is it builds down all the thought process of, oh, I'm the only one that's facing this problem.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And you start realizing that other people are facing this same problem. And he's like, hey, you know what did Clay do? Hey, what did Billy Bob do? Hey, what did Jeffrey? And then you're able to get these perspectives because they've already been there, done that. And it's like, hey, man, it sucks, but we can help you through that, walk you through that. You still got to walk through the crowd.
Correct.
But hey, man, maybe you could, avoid some grenades, right?
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this, Clay. How can my audience, okay, you've been just giving us so much value, which I really, really appreciate you just joining us and being able to just give so much value and your time. Where can they find you, Clay?
They can find me. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram at Purpose Infused Brotherhood. You can just look that up. Also, I also have the top 7 ways to get out of the work-life balance rut at buildbattlebond.com. So again, that's buildbattlebond.com. And then you can also check me out on Purpose Infused Brotherhood. .com. That's also there. We also have the Purpose Infused Brotherhood podcast, where we go through our weekly things. We kind of talk about that in our Facebook group, also on the podcast, and then in the Brotherhood as well. So we kind of have that all tied together for everybody there. So just look up Purpose Infused Brotherhood. You'll find me. But again, if you want that work-life balance, this is just something for men and women to also go through there too. Is at that top 7 ways to get out at buildbattlebond.com.
Awesome. And, guys, my audience, those links will actually be in the description below as well. So you can obviously get access to that and really reach out to Clay. And I would highly recommend it for those men and even women as well. But for specifically men that are struggling with that situation, wherever it is, you realize, hey, you cannot do this alone. And you realize also you're a high achiever, but there's something missing. Reach out to Clay. He knows what he's talking about. He's been there, done that. And he can help you have a different perspective and walk you through and live a free life, right? Being able to live that life. Clay, again, I really appreciate your time and energy. Is there anything else you want to leave before we let you go, bud?
Well, first, I want to thank you and all that you've done so far. I was listening to the finance ones. That definitely helped me out on the one that was just out. I forget what the name, Adam, I think something. But I want to appreciate you and just keep shining your light and doing that. And here's what I tell everybody else too is just make sure that when you step foot on the ground every single day, you just leave it all in the field. Know who you are, own yourself, love your story, live with purpose every single day, and go out and be the best version of yourself every day. That's what I say.
That's awesome. And ladies and gentlemen, that's Clay Smeltzer. And again, reach out to him with the links below. And guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Thanks so much.